Hi, everyone, and welcome to the new live stream from the London School of English. It's really good to see you joining us all here. So today we have a great topic to cover, which is formal and informal English. So for any of you who uses English, for example, for your work or your business meetings, this is going to be very useful. We've got lots of examples, including vocabulary, pronunciation tips, grammar, as well as some exercises. So hold on, and this would be something that you can practice throughout the live stream as well. We also have regular question and answers session at the end. So if you have any questions, write them in the comments in the live chat next to the video, and we'll answer them. And for those of you who are new here, we have regular live stream sessions on YouTube to help you learn English. So consider subscribing if you haven't already done so, because you will receive notifications about new live streams in business English, English grammar, English vocabulary. So that would be very useful for you, we hope. And if you are thinking of English training, perhaps, then you can always get in touch with us via our website as well, which is londonschool.com, and we'll be happy to help you further. So without further ado, I'm really happy to introduce to you two of my colleagues, Linda Stott, our expert English trainer. Hello, Linda.
Hi, Olga. Hi, Faiza.
Very good to see you. And I'm sure that a lot of you have joined our live streams before, already know Linda very well. So Linda will be teaching you how to use formal and informal English really well today. And we also have with us Faiza Afzal from our sales team. Hi, Faiza.
Hi, everyone.
Who is great at different styles of business English, has lots of experience in business communication with people from different countries and different cultures. So she'll also be helping you to answer any of your questions that you might have at the end of the Q&A. But let's really just get started with the main content. So Linda, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say hi and welcome to everybody. Also, Inigo, thank you so much for joining us. Right, so I'd like to start by giving you 3 informal sentences which I would like you to change so that they're more formal. And at the end of this live stream, we'll have a look at these 3 informal sentences again, and I'll provide you with some possible formal options to these informal sentences. So you might want to write them down. Olga's very kindly put them up on the screen for you. So you might want to write these down and look at them while I'm doing the live stream, and then possibly make the necessary changes to turn them into formal. So here are the 3 informal sentences. The first one is, see you on 31 August. The second is, why don't you try the London School of English? And the third sentence is, let me know when you're coming. So formality is an interesting topic. There's a lot to consider, a lot to think about. And as we only have a short time within which to take a look at it in this session, I'll touch on a few things that I think are important to consider. So first of all, as always, culture comes into it. We know that certain cultures will maintain formality regardless of whether they know a person well or not. And other cultures will drop the use of formal language once they have got to know you better. In addition, different industries will use different levels of formality. For instance, the level of formality might be quite different in the finance or banking sector as opposed to, say, for instance, the marketing sector or advertising sector. So the language used and the formality might be very, very different. Furthermore, different companies have different policies regarding formality. And finally, we have to consider generational formality. By this, I mean that each generation might consider formality as more important or less important. Some generations or industries might consider formal language as a thing of the past, not important, old school, a dying language. If we consider the rise in the use of social media as a means of communicating and how technology has dramatically increased the pace of life, then we can see that formality has or is becoming less important. Or is it? Let's look at this a little bit more. I've taught business people who have mentioned that they use WhatsApp to do business. One gentleman told me that he negotiated $1 million contract using WhatsApp. And of course, on this platform, he wasn't using formal language. He was simply using whatever language was necessary to get his message across, to confirm information, and so on. He was probably using abbreviations as well. So I think in this modern techno-driven era, there is often an overlap between formal, less formal, or informal. And so at times, it might get a bit confusing. Well, I'm a bit old school. I tend to think that yes, it is important to consider formality when speaking or writing, to consider the setting, the people, or the person you are communicating with, to consider your target audience as well. How professional do you want to be? How important is it in relation to your role, your status, your industry, your company, and so on? Is it a question of simply being a useful tool in sounding more professional in formal settings? And does it help you to communicate more effectively? No one is going to say, oh my gosh, he or she is just so polite and formal. I'd rather have somebody say that than say, oh, that person is so rude and so impolite. But then I'm old school. So we can see that using more formal language could help you when you are dealing cross-culturally. It could help you to eliminate any misunderstandings. And more importantly, it could help you sound polite and more professional. I suppose one way of thinking about the differences between formal and informal might be to think about these two situations. So, if you were invited to a beach party, would you wear a suit and a tie? Perhaps it's cultural, and you see, lots to consider. But generally speaking, you wouldn't, right? You wouldn't wear a suit and a tie to a beach party. Similarly, if you were invited to attend a job interview, would you wear shorts and a t-shirt? Well, unless I'm really out of touch, I think you definitely wouldn't. I'm sure you would agree with me. So, when considering what language to use, perhaps it might help you to consider these two situations when deciding whether you want to use formal language or less formal language. I just want to stop for a minute. Quite a few people have joined us, and I just would like to acknowledge everyone that's joined us and say thank you so much for tuning in with us today. So moving on, firstly, let's look at some formal language. Formal language is always going to be less personal because it's used when people don't know each other very well. So generally speaking, we use formal language for the following reasons. When you are communicating with someone that you don't know very well, business emails, academic writing or articles, professional academic situations, presentations, reports, job interviews, public tenders, official documents, talking to superiors, legal documents, talking to the public, such as speeches or lectures. So let's have a look at the language side of things in a bit more detail. From a language perspective, what do we need to think about when using formal language? First of all, and most importantly, grammar. So let's have a look at that. Usually, in a formal setting, the grammar is far more complex, and sentences are generally longer. So, more formal, more complex, and longer. To give you an example, we regret to inform you that the delivery will be delayed due to the adverse weather conditions. Lovely, structured, formal sentence. And the same sentence, using less formal language, might sound like this. Sorry, but the delivery will be late because of the weather. So already we can begin to see and feel the difference. Formal, much longer, vocabulary is longer, the grammar is more complex, the less formal, shorter words, shorter sentences, less complex grammar. Informal language as well, we generally tend to use modal verbs. Now, for those of you who haven't watched some of the previous live streams we've done, you will notice on some of those, if you'd like to go back and have a look at them, that we've talked about modal verbs a lot in terms of professional, polite, formal language. So we often use modal verbs. An example of this would be, we would be grateful if, could you kindly inform us as soon as possible. We know as well that with formal language, it's less direct. Examples, we regret to inform you that, I'm sorry, but is a little bit less formal. And you can see with the second example, you can notice how we generally don't use the more personal pronoun I, and we opt for using we. This is to make the statement less personal and therefore more formal. Remember, less personal, more formal. Another example, we have pleasure in announcing, and if we wanted to make that less formal, we would say, I'm happy to say. I'd like to move now on to looking at vocabulary. Now, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, formal words are generally longer words or words with origins in Latin and Greek, whereas more informal vocabulary involves shorter words or words with origins in Anglo-Saxon. For example, require, more formal, need, less formal, purchase, more formal, buy, less formal, acceptable, more formal, less formal, okay. I'll be looking at some more examples of vocabulary later on in this live stream. So let's move on to pronunciation. Speech is generally slower, allowing for more correct and clear pronunciation. In addition, the tone of the voice is generally more serious. When we look at contractions, they are definitely not used in formal language. And if we think about legal documents, you will never, ever find the use of contractions in a legal document. So this is really important to remember. So an example of this, full form, she has decided to accept the job offer, and the contracted form, she's decided to accept the job offer. So we use the contracted form in informal or less formal situations, and most certainly when we are speaking and in everyday situations. It helps us to speak a little bit faster, and of course, it's less formal. We don't use abbreviations and acronyms. So for instance, ASAP, if we want to use that formally, we would say as soon as possible. We don't say ad or advert. If we want to use it in a formal situation, we would say advertisement. PC, personal computer. Photo, photograph. Memo, the Americans say memo, which sounds like a Finding Nemo, but it's not the case. But in England, we say memo, memorandum. And then we talk a lot about text speak. So for instance, BTW, formal by the way, TBH, to be honest. And we can see that this kind of text speak can be quite useful. As I mentioned at the beginning about this client using WhatsApp, this kind of text speak is useful if you want to communicate quickly to your client or to a customer or colleague. Much more useful to use this, what we call text speak. Or LOL, which one friend of mine said, oh, that means lots of love. But no, it doesn't. It means laugh out loud. Laugh out loud. So formal language is more common in writing, much more common in writing. We don't use colloquial language in formal writing or formal English speaking. An example of colloquial language would be something like, fancy a cuppa? In a more formal situation, you would say, would you like a cup of tea? So we can see that the use of the vocabulary and the use of the would is a good example in this sentence, because fancy is less formal. And if we were looking for an alternative formal word for fancy, the expression is, would you like? So fancy turns out to be, would you like? So this is an excellent example of how the sentence becomes much longer in formal language. We definitely don't use emojis in formal writing. Formal language is also less personal. So we tend not to, as I mentioned earlier, we tend not to use the I pronoun, and we opt more for the we pronoun. And some people say because the language is less personal, it helps us to be more effective because you can just get on with the job at hand. Some more examples. of the use of this pronoun, I can help you solve this problem. Call me. More formal, changing the I, we can assist in the resolution of this matter. Contact us on our helpline number. So I think we've more or less covered a great deal as far as the formal language goes. So what about informal language or less formal language? When do we use it? Well, it's commonly used in situations that are more relaxed, and it involves people that you know well or that people that know each other well. We use informal language often in business conversation, in speaking, especially everyday conversations, personal emails, text messages, social media. And this is an interesting point. Very often informal language is used in advertisements, and it's used to make it more personal, and in that way the marketers reach their target audience. And we also use it in spontaneous speech. So, language-wise, what do we need to consider? Well, grammar is definitely less complex, sentences are shorter, and preciseness isn't as crucial as more formal language, as I illustrated in the examples that I gave earlier. Ellipsis. What is this? Ellipsis is when we leave out words that we don't use because we know they would seem obvious to the listener. So, for example, I could say, seen my glasses? So what has been ellipted or left out is have you. So in a little bit more formal, we'll say, have you seen my glasses? And another example is, sorry to keep you waiting. What has been ellipted or left out is, I am sorry to keep you waiting. Very often with ellipsis, we don't even realize that these words have been left out when we are using it informally. Let's move on to vocabulary with relation to informal language. So here are some examples. Want, less formal; more formal, require. So I want something and I require, or we require, this information. Help would be less formal. More formal, assistance. We seek your assistance. We want your help. We can see that there is a big difference in feeling between the two. So if we put this all together, the sentence might look something like this. If you want any help, you could call Mary. If you require any assistance, you could telephone Mary Smith. Completely different in the more formal setting. With informal language, especially with speaking, the tone is generally softer and more personal. Contractions are used for easy flow and faster speech. Abbreviations, acronyms, emojis, or emoticons are really very often used. Also, we often use delaying expressions when speaking to give us time to think. So delaying expressions could be something like, well, I believe, you know, well, that's a good question. I believe we should all consider learning English, you know, especially now that we have become a global village. This is very useful when you're speaking or spontaneous speech. It delays, it helps you to give you time to get your thoughts into a lovely grammatical, correct grammar and correct use of vocabulary. So here are a few more examples to illustrate the differences between formal and less formal. So in a formal situation, you would say, we are in receipt of. Less formal, we have received. Formal, we would like to. Less formal, we want to. And of course, greetings are different too. So, how do you do? This is formal and quite old-fashioned, but is still used a lot in the UK. Whereas hi or hello is less formal, but as I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, more and more there is a mushmash and a mixture of things, an overlap of formal, less formal, and informal. So I think depending on the situation, you can get away with saying hi or hello, but it's definitely less formal. Going to meet somebody, how do you do? Usually you reach out your hand to give them a handshake. How do you do? If you're meeting someone for the first time, you might say, pleased to meet you. Let's do a role play to demonstrate these greetings and the different formalities. And while we are doing it, I'd like you to think about this. Which one is more formal and which one is less formal? We're going to do role play situation 1 and role play situation 2. Over to you, Olga and Pfizer.
So role play 1. Morning.
Hiya.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you for a second? Just to give the context, role play situation 1 is 2 colleagues at work.
Morning.
Hiya. How's it going?
Good, thanks. You?
Yeah, fine.
Wonderful. So an Oscar there, I think. Okay, role play situation 2. This is between a client and a consultant.
Good morning, Faiza.
Good morning, Olga. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. So we can see with these 2 different role plays how the tone is different, the language is different, the whole situation is different. So which situation was more formal? Was it situation 1 or was it situation 2? Drum roll. Woohoo! Indeed, it was situation 2. It was the second one was far, far, far more formal. We've spoken in a lot of these live streams about the importance of bearing in mind different cultures and how different cultures go about doing things. And most certainly with regards to formal, less formal, and informal language, culture comes into this and is hugely important. So at this point, I'd like to give you a little bit of a cultural tip. Generally speaking, in the UK, in British English, when we ask, how are you? In a formal setting, the person asking is not expecting you to give them a long, lengthy explanation or description of what is going on with your health or your life. It is simply an extension of the greeting. So on the whole, we tend to give a short answer such as, fine, thank you, good, thank you. And technically speaking, we like to keep the answer positive to avoid any unpleasant or difficult conversations which might be inappropriate in a formal setting. This is really important because I've had students get so confused who come from different cultures, and someone's asked them, how are you? And they launched into an explanation about how they'd had a difficult day or whatever it was. And the person that they were speaking to didn't seem very interested, and she said she felt terrible. And I explained to her that generally speaking, in the UK, in a formal sort of situation, you wouldn't wait for the person to give you an explanation. It's simply a greeting. It's really important to remember that, because a lot of misunderstandings can happen, and we don't want that in business, because it takes time to build relationships, and this kind of misunderstanding can create stumbling blocks in trust building and building up relationships. However, in a less formal setting, the above situation would probably still apply, except if you aren't having a good day, you would probably say something like, yeah, I'm okay, thank you. So we can see that the tone of voice, so very often in the UK, we tend to rather use our tone of voice to communicate the message rather than always using language. So if we're not okay, yeah, okay, thank you. And that's it. We would leave it at that and move on. Really important to understand that. So I'd like to look now at emails, because a lot of clients often say they struggle with the formality with writing emails. So I'd like to give you a few examples of the different language you might use for emailing someone. I'm just looking here and I see all of you with the situation role play. You all got it, that it was situation 2. Well done, well done. Anyway, moving back to the emails. So here are a few examples of different language you might use for emailing someone. So to start off an email, or the greeting of an email, in a formal way, you would say, dear sir, or dear madam, or dear Mrs. Jones. Less formal, you still need to use the dear, but you would be safe to use the person's name. And to be honest, nowadays, culturally, in the UK, we generally tend to use people's first names. I know in a lot of other cultures, even if you are familiar with the person, you generally tend to stick with the full name of the person. But in the UK, we generally use, in a less formal email, we would happily and safely use the person's name. Informal, hi Jack. However, nowadays, as I mentioned, because of this squishing together of language due to social media and so on, hi Jack is an acceptable greeting when emailing somebody, provided that you know them well. That's the key. Further examples, I'm writing to inform you that. Less formal or neutral, I thought I should let you know that. Informal, just a quick note to tell you that. Be careful about this because you need to remember who is your target audience, how well do you know them, etc. Some more examples. I regret to inform you that the meeting will be postponed. Less formal, I'm afraid that the meeting will be postponed. And informal, bad news, they're putting the meeting off. So we can already begin to feel some of these big differences between the two, between, formal and less formal and informal. And we can start to feel, would you feel comfortable saying, bad news, they're putting the meeting off? Would you feel comfortable saying that to somebody you don't know very well? Other examples of the differences. If you wish to receive a copy of the report, could you kindly inform us? Less formal or neutral. If you want a copy of the report, please tell us. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, there are many degrees of formality and informality, and a lot of overlapping could occur. However, I think the key is to think about context, your target language, and then decide which register, formal, less formal or neutral, or informal, which of these is more appropriate. Remember, using very formal English in everyday situations can make you sound pretentious or pompous. And it could also sound funny, as we sometimes use formal language in informal situations for comic effect. So always think about the context and your target audience. Right, at the very beginning of this live stream, I gave you 3 informal sentences, and I asked you to change them during this live stream to make them more formal. Of course, there isn't only one answer to this, and I'm going to give you I'm going to give you one example of each that you could have said to make these formal. So for the first one, see you on 31 August. To change this into something more formal, we would say, we look forward to seeing you on the 31st of August. We can see that with the more formal option, there's no misunderstanding this person at all. In the second example, why don't you try the London School of English? I would recommend the London School of English. Lovely use of the modal auxiliary would. Nice long vocabulary word, recommend instead of try, and the London School of English. In the third example, let me know when you're coming. I would be grateful if you could inform me of when you will arrive. So here we've got the use of the modal auxiliary verb would. We're also saying, I would be grateful, instead of just saying, let me know, nice and polite. And if you could, nice use of modal auxiliary verb, when you're coming. So we say, could you inform me of when you will arrive, rather than say, inform me of when you will be coming. So that's all for now. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. This was so interesting.
Yeah.
And lots of very good examples. And I guess on our part, we can say that Faiza and I really enjoyed the role play.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, I think I'm going to issue an Oscar after this. Woo, for the performance.
Thank you, thank you.
You must have stayed up all night.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got lots and lots of comments and lots of questions. So I just wanted to highlight some of them from the first part of the live stream. So just to say, of course, hello, of course, to our alumni and people who already know us, but also to the new people. We have some opinions about formal and informal English use. For example, Adriana Martinez is saying that formal English is better in business communication. And then she also points out that it very much depends on the sector.
Absolutely. That is so well put and really good English. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. As we discussed at the beginning, it definitely depends on the sector.
And we've got Tanya Gestas, one of our alumni.
Oh, Tanya.
Hi, Tanya. Good to see you.
So let me find, I'm not sure if I would be able to find it because there's quite a lot of comments, but Tanya also mentioned that it's very important to be polite in formal language, particularly when it comes to business.
You can never, ever go wrong. I'm sure Faiza would agree with that.
Yeah, she commented saying being discreet and kind in all circumstances is essential, which is very much true. I think, Linda, you mentioned it in your examples as well, that in most business settings, it's almost better to perhaps be more formal and seen as kind or polite or clear than it is to perhaps be more informal. What I would also say is, it depends on the sector, but then it also depends on the relationship you have. So, for example, there are some clients that I've worked with when I first started at the school, and it's now been 4 years working with them. So the type of language I use has changed. It might have been at the start of our relationship that it was formal communication. And then gradually, if we get to know each other, or to be honest, I always take the guide from my client to say, if I notice that their language has become more informal, then I will reflect that in mine. But even then, I think, we've spoken as colleagues, and I would probably say my language is more formal than most. But now in this new kind of COVID world where we're working online quite a lot, we use, for example, the Teams chat. And there my language is a lot more informal maybe than I'm used to, but maybe sometimes I'm still formal. So it's just,
there's such an overlap.
Like it's to be honest, it's changing a lot now with technology and people working remotely, that in the past you might have been very super formal. And again, it's as you said, Linda, the context, the audience, the sector, the relationship, how long, and what you feel comfortable with too, because you might not feel comfortable using informal language.
Yeah, sounds like we all are constantly learning. So another, I'm just mindful of the time, and we have quite a few questions. So I'll probably just focus on 3 of them. One of the questions was from Kira earlier. So she asked to give some tips on improving vocabulary, because formal language requires quite a lot of very specific words. So Linda, Faiza, what's your opinion?
There are a number of I think on our website, on one of our blogs, there is actually a listing of some of the language. I'm not sure, does she mean vocabulary in general or formal to informal?
I think,
Kira, I'm not sure. But if you want to improve vocabulary generally, I think that a good way is to actually listen to some TED Talks, pull up the transcript. You can get it in your mother tongue language, some of the transcripts, or you can get it in English. You can read it in English. You can print it off. You can highlight any new vocabulary. I'm a bit old school, and I think it is useful to use translation because it gives you a good sense of things. But I'm a bit old school, and I tend to think that it's probably more useful when your English is at a higher level to rather use a good English dictionary such as Cambridge. And also in Cambridge, you have the opportunity with Cambridge Plus, you have the opportunity to record any new vocabulary that you're learning so that you can test yourself and learn. So I think it's a good idea maybe to keep a notebook. Anything you hear, anything you read, write the word down, go and study it. This is a good way. So I think lots of listening, lots of reading. I think this is a start.
I'd say another follow-on question actually we had from one of the students is, you can see a lot of language in your own interactions. So if you see somebody using a word, you can kind of make a note of it. And as Linda said, if you're not sure of the meaning, look it up as translated or English to English, because I think one of the other questions we had was somebody asked, what does pompous mean?
Yes, and I wanted to bring that in because...
And so I was just going to say that one of the things you should also be mindful of is make sure you use words that you understand, and don't just bring it in, because this is where, Linda, your point of getting the translation, but then also the English to English, because sometimes it's not exactly the same. So I always say that, use something if you're comfortable knowing the exact meaning, and then you know what it means, because throwing in words that are new or bigger or exactly the same doesn't always work sometimes. So you just have to be a bit careful.
So what I want to just quickly say to go on and look it up. Go onto a good English Cambridge dictionary. And this is exactly why I didn't give the meaning, because I was hoping, I'm so glad you've asked that question, because what I really want is to encourage you and inspire you to go and pick up a dictionary or to Google it in Cambridge and look up the meaning, because looking up the meaning doesn't just give you the meaning, it gives you what part of speech is it. Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? Could I use it in many? Could I, some words in English could be nouns, could be verbs. You get the pronunciation. It could be attached to a phrasal verb. It could be part of an idiomatic expression. So you're not just learning about the meaning when you look up a word. You're learning so much more than just the meaning. So go and look it up.
And then come back on another session and tell us.
Yes.
Okay. And then also another question, again, related to vocabulary. Lots of vocabulary questions today.
Hi, Cassio.
Please. So is this formal language, or can it be used informally?
I think kindly is generally related to more formal, and please, depending on the context of the sentence, you could probably use those in formal and less formal.
Yeah. I'd say also one of the things I've noted. My native language is Bengali, and there actually you phrase things differently, and you have different forms depending on how you're speaking. So there isn't necessarily a word for please. And we find this in many other languages as well. Yeah. So we often have our clients not used to the concept of adding please to the language, because the way in which you would form a sentence or approach a sentence would be completely different depending on who you're talking to. But the earlier point of, if you want to be on the safe side, it's always helpful to have please.
Yes,
maybe not too many.
Words.
Yeah, maybe not too many as well, because you have to balance that too. But it does help if you're a little bit worried. Is what I'm saying quite direct, or could it be construed as rude? If you put a please in, it can help. So,
absolutely.
For example, if you say "call me," it could be quite direct depending on who you're asking.
Yeah.
You could say, "Please call me." And then if you want to make it more formal, as Linda said, make it longer. Please call me when you can. And, there and there and there.
Please call me.
Could you please call me?
Nice use of modal verbs.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So we do have quite a lot more comments. And then I think, unfortunately, because all of our sessions have the beginning and the end, we need to wrap up here. But what
dear.
Any questions related to what we've just been talking about, you can still write your questions in the comments below the video after we're finished, and then we'll endeavor to definitely answer them. So don't hesitate to do that. Also, do subscribe to our channel for more videos and live streams. For example, next week we have another live stream on business English, specifically business English grammar and grammar mistakes. So that would be very useful. And then the following week, we've got another business English live stream with Linda on small talk and networking. So do subscribe to the channel. And then, of course, watch this video again, learn this vocabulary, and also visit our website, because we have a blog with lots of English tips and articles, including expressions that you can learn. That's on londonschool.com. And of course, if you've got any questions related to training with our expert English trainers, then do contact us as well by phone. Call me, right, Linda? Just referring to one of your examples. Or exactly, or write or send us a message. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining this live stream, for all of your comments.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we hope to see you again. So
we'll hopefully see some of our clients face to face very soon.
Yes.
On the 31st of August. We are very much excited to welcome everyone back.
Yeah.
So stay well.
Be safe.
Be safe.
And keep learning English.
Yes.
There we go.
Stay safe. Keep learning English. Thank you so much. See you in 2 weeks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.